Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, Chief Constable and the team, and all our visitors today in person and via our live stream. And apologies for our late start. We have been very well behaved up until now, but it's coming near Christmas, so we'll forgive the fact we're a bit late getting started. We had a lot to agree upstairs. Since our last meeting, the Fresh Start political agreement has been published, and within that there were various welcome developments. However, it is disappointing that resolutions could not be reached in relation to the Historical Investigations Unit and the impact that this will have moving forward for us as well as for others. Addressing legacy issues is important for victims and their families, and I know it's also important for you, Chief Constable, in terms of the challenges presented to policing in prioritising resources within the organisation. The agreement, of course, did bring some certainty around funding and resources for the service, which is very welcome, and I'm sure you will elaborate on this. The agreement also maps out some new structures to tackle paramilitary activity, criminality and organised crime. Paramilitary attacks continue to happen, and there does need to be strong community and policing response to this. We are very well aware of the issues relating to securing cooperation in investigations, and of course, as we witnessed in the Bangor attack, those who stand up against criminals can become the focus of attention. And this is not acceptable now, nor ever will it be. Now, we're pleased that there are new cross-border measures introduced into the agreement, so we will be interested in hearing how the PSNI are contributing to this. We know that cross-border working relationships between the two services are excellent, and the arms find this week is very welcome. Our thoughts are with the officers who were so lucky to escape their gun attack in West Belfast. And the condemnation from the local community is testimony that the majority of people have moved on. The Criminal Justice Inspectorate published a report last week around the quality of case files and the standards of disclosures from PSNI in respect of court proceedings. Particular recommendations to improve the system and cooperation between PPS and PSNI were made, so I would welcome hearing views on this. With regard to staying safe at Christmas, the Policing and Community Safety Partnerships and the PSNI have partnered to roll out some very important messages over the next few weeks, all about keeping people and property safe. And this is very relevant at Christmas when people are out socialising or doing their online shopping. And I suppose all of us can do with a few reminders. One of the major reminders, I think, is around drink driving. And we have some questions during the session on what the police plan to do over the Christmas period. One of the strong pieces of advice given by the police and the PCSPs is to make plans for the morning after a night out when there is a possibility that you may be over the limit if you were drinking, and many people fail to consider this. The board has signed up to the Women's Aid 16 Days of Action. We have pledged to ensure that domestic violence is a priority for policing in our oversight role and to work to raise awareness of the issues both at board level and through the network of PCSPs. And finally, I'm pleased to see that the new station in Downpatrick opened this week. I hope to get a visit there very soon, but I'm sure that all the officers there are delighted with the new premises, as the Irish Street station was very well past its sell-by date. And now, Chief Constable, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for those words. It is a week ago tonight since the callous gun attack on police officers on duty in West Belfast, and only for the protective glass in their police car, this board meeting would almost certainly have been mourning the loss of two of our officers. Two young men who are sons, husbands, and one of them a father. Thankfully, they will be sharing this Christmas with their families. This attack is another chilling reminder of the threat facing our officers and staff. However, this is a threat that also puts the community in danger. As our officers were sitting in their police car just before 7 p.m. in the evening, there were families sitting in their homes all around them. The sheer geography of this residential area meant that there were only centimetres between those bullets hitting the police car or hitting a family home. And Monday's paramilitary-style shooting of two men in a pigeon club in West Belfast took place just before 4 o'clock in the afternoon, when children would have been on their way home from school and people making their way home from work. So far from protecting the community, as some of these people would claim, such attacks bring fear and intimidation onto our streets. The same can be said, of course, for the recent hammer attack on the man in front of his family in Bangor that you have referred to, Chair. These are the hallmarks of brutality, of thuggery, of criminality. They're not some sort of a noble cause, as those who carry them out would purport. Our officers and staff, together with the vast majority of the community in Northern Ireland, remain absolutely determined that such violence will never be successful. My message to those who use such violence is a really simple one. The police service exists to protect life, to prevent crime, and to bring people to justice. You will not deter us from doing our job. You will not push us out of communities. We're there to stay. And for as long as you continue to put communities in danger, we will relentlessly investigate you and put you before the courts. The police service has the support of the vast majority of the community in Northern Ireland, who do not want violence on their streets as their children walk to and from school. We're also supported by our colleagues in Garda Síochána, who earlier this week made a significant weapons and explosives find in Monaghan, just across the border. And this, of course, followed a seizure of significant bomb-making components and ammunition in West Belfast just 10 days ago. So our efforts will continue for as long as the threat to our communities remain. As you have mentioned, Chair, since we last met, we've had the publication of the Fresh Start Stormont Agreement, and the Police Service welcomes the agreement as progress towards a safe, confident and peaceful society. As I have outlined in my report to the Board, there are a number of issues in the agreement that have implications for policing, and where appropriate we will play our full part in supporting its implementation. Paramilitarism and organised crime have a disproportionate effect on our most vulnerable communities, and we recognise the clear political focus and financial commitments that this agreement brings to tackling these issues. I'm also very grateful for the continuation of the additional security funding. This funding has been a critical element over the past 4 years in dealing with the severe security threat, and its continuation will sustain our work in protecting communities. Board members will not, however, be surprised to hear me say that the one area of real disappointment for us as the police service, and indeed for many grieving families, is the lack of agreement on dealing with the past. As board members are already aware, this will have significant implications for PSNI from both a financial and a public confidence perspective. We have allocated 70 staff, that includes 55 experienced investigators, to our Legacy Investigations Branch. However, Legacy Investigations Branch was never designed to be a long-term solution to our past. Following the closure of HET, Legacy Investigations Branch should have provided an interim solution until the Historical Inquiries Unit was formed. Legacy Investigations Branch current workload includes the Bloody Sunday investigation, the Military Reaction Force investigation, investigations emanating from the Boston College tapes, and the review of the so-called on-the-runs letters. The branch is also scoping the investigative requirements and options following the recent Section 35(5) referral from the Director of Public Prosecutions into the activities of the individual referred to as Steak Knife. This is in addition to the 937 incomplete HET cases that will now not transfer to the HIU, at least for the time being. So while PSNI remain committed to playing our part in dealing with the past, and in particular in supporting those families who continue to suffer as a result of the past, In the absence of significant additional financial and human resources, our ability to make progress will continue to be seriously hampered. 55 investigators is nowhere near the 250 to 300 that was being discussed for the Historical Investigations Unit. While many people have confidence in PSNI's commitment to investigating the past, we cannot ignore the fact that there are many others who do not. For many people affected by the past, the perception of independence will only be possible when dealing with the past sits entirely outside of the Police Service of Northern Ireland. Our legacy-related work is facing almost weekly challenge, related predominantly to the speed at which we can conduct a significant volume of work and also the perceived independence of the police service to do it. The result is that over 50% of our legal services department are now working on legacy-related issues. It's also a fact that the investigators working in Legacy Investigations Branch, that's 55 experienced investigators, we're not using those people to deal with other serious crimes of the present day. For example, our human trafficking unit currently consists of 8 officers, and those 8 officers are working on 16 ongoing complex investigations. While in our public protection branch, approximately 60 police officers are dealing with over 1,200 child abuse investigations, and just over 30 police officers are dealing with over 300 of the most serious domestic abuse investigations. These illustrations provide just a glimpse of the challenges that we're facing. The reality is, if I put resources into one area of policing, I must take it from another. I'm absolutely not saying that the past should not be reviewed and investigated and dealt with. People need answers to questions. But I am repeating the point that I have made on many occasions before. The public services of today, including the Police Service of Northern Ireland, are not set up or suitably resourced to respond to the demands of dealing with the past. This service executive team and I are currently considering the broader consequences of the lack of agreement on dealing with the past. And whilst the PSNI will never shirk our responsibilities, I will not allow this organisation to become the scapegoat for political failure to reach an agreement on this critical issue of the past. Chair, I'm sure this is something that we will discuss again when we meet in the new year. This is our last Policing Board meeting of 2015, and this has been a year of immense challenge, but also one of which we as a team take great pride. We are incredibly proud of the often untold story of the professionalism and bravery displayed by the officers and staff of the police service. Whether it is the police officer who went into a river to save a life, or the call handler who kept the vulnerable suicidal gentleman on the phone until help could be got to him. It's those everyday stories of keeping people safe that make our jobs worthwhile. As Christmas draws closer, many people will be thinking of holiday time and time with their families. For the police service, Christmas is a busy period when demand is high and officers and staff will be on duty right through the Christmas period. So on behalf of myself and the Deputy Chief Constable and the broader team, I want to thank those officers and staff publicly today for their continued commitment and hard work. And I also want to say thank you to you as a board, to the Chair, to the Vice Chair, and to all the board members for your challenge and support throughout the year that's coming to a close. I wish you and your families and friends a safe and peaceful Christmas. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that comprehensive report. And since we're a bit late, I just want to go straight into questions, if that's all right. And I'm going to start with Jonathan Craig.
Yeah. Thank you, Chief Constable. I was glad that you did refer to the gun attack that took place on your officers in West Belfast. And I want to pay tribute to the bravery that those officers showed. I certainly dealt and knew officers in the past who were attacked in that way. And the thing I found remarkable was that within 24 hours they were back in uniform, carrying out their job and carrying it out in the same places where they were attacked previously, which I think speaks volumes of the bravery of the officers within the force. Chief Constable, families of the police officers have approached us with regards to the duty of care that both this board and yourself have around the safety of officers. When there is a heightened alert in a specific area, could you possibly outline to us what additional measures will be taken to ensure that everything is done to prevent these murderous attacks on your officers?
Well, I don't want to get into the operational detail of what we do. I'm not going to educate the terrorist. I'm sure you wouldn't expect me to do that publicly. Happy to have private conversations, of course, with board members on those sorts of issues. However, it's a major concern to us. It's the first point that I mentioned in my opening remarks at this public meeting of the Policing Board since the attacks took place. We are concerned about the safety of our officers. We take it very seriously. The refresh of the police fleet shows that in terms of the investment that we're making around armoured cars, for example. And whilst I'm not wanting to underplay the trauma that would be caused to those officers, we were grateful that the investment, through the additional security funding, by the way, that was made in armouring of police vehicles in some areas, did its job last Thursday night and undoubtedly protected the lives of those two officers. But Stephen has responsibility for district policing, and he may wish to talk about some of the wider issues and the review sort of mechanisms that would kick in after events such as last Thursday.
Okay, Jonathan, I think the first thing is for us all to remember, I suppose, that the police were at that location because there had been an attempted murder a number of days earlier, and that man still remains critically ill. There were very clear investigative opportunities at the scene, and that's why the police were there. The police were there for some time. There was some very extensive and exacting time-consuming forensic work going on. And the rules of evidence require us to be able to stand over the protection of the scene, and that meant that police officers had to remain. We have seen even in Ardoyne where police set a pattern where there's a predictability around police presence. We've seen 4 attempted murders of police in the last number of years because police go there 6 nights a week currently to deal with the parading issue. And unfortunately, in this case, the police had been there a number of days. There was a predictability, and it was exploited. And it was exploited by people who set out to do the very opposite that the police were doing. The police were there to protect, investigate crime. These people set out to murder the police. And unfortunately, we have a service to provide. We're a police service, and that means at times we have to expose ourselves to some risk and to some danger in the protection of the community. But the human rights and the protection and the safety of our police officers is of critical importance to us. It occupies a lot of our mind. And as the Chief has said, I don't want to go into the issues in any detail, but we do think about the volume of resources, we think about equipment, we think about support of patrolling, we think about the acquiring of the appropriate intelligence. And there's a whole range of steps that we take to try and ensure that our officers stay as safe as possible, but recognising that we operate in an environment with a severe threat that people will try and exploit. And it's our job to protect society and protect people, and at times put ourselves at risk. But we're also a learning organisation, so as a consequence of the shooting attack, we have commissioned a review. That review is going to be led both within the district, and I've spoken at length with District Commander, Chief Superintendent Grimshaw, who I will say kept this matter and the police attendance under regular review. And it will also be assisted, the review, by some of Alan's resources within combined operational training. So I've asked for that review when it's complete to be sent to me so that we can capture any learning. But there will always be risk, unfortunately, at this time where a severe threat remains. We'll do everything we can to get the balance right, but our balance will always be towards protecting society.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Bryce Dixon.
Thank you, Chair. Chief Constable, in your remarks you explained the work of the Legacy Investigation Branch and the various high-profile cases that it's dealing with, and we've had announcements recently about progress with the Bloody Sunday cases and the military research force and the Boston College tapes, etc. I'm wondering about the 937 incomplete HET cases which you referred to. Is there any likelihood of families receiving reports into the reviews of those cases, or any of those cases, in the near future?
Well, we're still working through the consequences, the implications of the lack of consensus and legislative political solutions to dealing with the past that we all, I think, have been hopeful to come out of the latest Stormont agreement. So we are engaged with the Department of Justice and the Northern Ireland office around that. There is also a trilateral meeting between the Chair, the Vice Chair, ourselves and the DOJ scheduled for later in this month. So we're working through what the implications are of this responsibility, because in the absence of an HIU, the only people with the statutory authority and responsibility to conduct investigations is us. At the minute, we have exercised some judgment about the numbers of people that were committing to this, and as I mentioned the cases in my opening remarks, they are fully committed on a number of investigations. And I also need to deal, so while the resourcing levels stay as they are, the answer to the question about our families of that group of 937 incomplete cases that HET never got to, are likely to get reports anyway soon. The answer is no, they're not, because we don't have the capacity to get to them. And this is the dilemma that I have. I explained in my opening remarks the number of detectives I had working on child abuse investigations. That is children who are at risk today and who are victims today. Human trafficking cases, 16 cases with just 8 officers attached to it. And actually we can only spread the jam so thinly before it becomes completely ineffective. Now, there are other issues around how we can build capacity and capability to address the legacy cases. There's two big issues around these legacy issues. One of them is capacity or resources, and there perhaps is an answer there in that some of the funding that could have been used for historical investigations unit and the 150 million over 5 years, can that be diverted to allow us to recruit and train people in a sustainable way over a reasonable period of time. But there's another issue beside capacity, which is confidence. I said in my opening remarks that whilst lots of families and people who are still grieving don't have confidence in the police service to do this, or sorry, do have confidence in the police service, there's also a significant proportion of people who don't, because of the perception that we're not independent, that we've got too much of a stake and too many links into the past. And I respect those views that people hold. So it's not just about resources and capacity, it's also about confidence. And unfortunately for us, we had hoped that both of those issues would have been dealt with under the architecture of HIU and the other infrastructure that was being developed to deal with the past. In the absence of that, I accept our legal and statutory responsibility to get on with it, but actually it's not ideal, it's not perfect, but we will do our professional level best to act with integrity around all of this. In terms of what we will pick up clearly there's a case scheduling model that means that we're not just doing work on who shouts the loudest about their case, and this has been shared with the board at committee level. There's a case scheduling model, and you'll not be surprised to hear that when I have a statutory responsibility in the way of a section 35(5) referral from the Director of Public Prosecutions to investigate something, then that has to take priority, and that's the case. We have a number of those at the minute. The most recent one of which is the referral to do with the individual referred to as steak knife. Although we would be investigating the crime, not just an individual, but the full range of actors and participants in that from wherever they come. And we're still working out, by the way, how we're going to resource that, both from an independence and confidence point of view, and also from a financial and a resourcing point of view. So I'm sorry, Bryce, that I don't have any clear, crisp answers, but we are engaged with the people that need to be, with yourselves as a board, with the DOJ, with the NIO, and we know what the problems are. Unfortunately, the politics hasn't brought us a solution to the problems that we've been hoping for, but we will act in good faith to do our best within those parameters and restrictions that we have.
Thank you, Chief, for that comprehensive answer. But just to be clear then, since the HET stopped working on the last day of last year, is it accurate to say that none of the families whose cases were pending at that time have, in the meantime, had a report from the Legacy Investigations Branch, and that they're not really likely to get a report until some of these other high-profile cases that you've talked about are complete?
Well, I wouldn't say nobody has had a report. There was work finished off, and a small number of reports, as I understand it, have been issued, but that was largely finishing work that had been started. The prioritisation over the last year, and since the creation of Legacy Investigations Branch, has been around the cases that I have mentioned in my remarks. And actually, that 5 or 6 cases, and 1 or 2 other specific pieces of work that have come in where there's been an evidential opportunity through forensic opportunities and so on that have come up. Of course, we've grabbed those and we'll run with them. But by and large, it's those high-profile cases that have come with a statutory obligation for us to investigate within a reasonable timescale. The other review work, and don't forget, this 937 cases, it's not as if they haven't had the benefit of investigation. It might not be to today's standards, and I appreciate and empathise with families that have unanswered questions, but they have had some degree of investigation. The idea of initially the HET and then Legacy Investigations Branch, if it ever gets to them, of reviewing them, was to try to apply modern day standards to see if there was anything else that we could exploit through the criminal justice, towards a criminal justice outcome, or indeed even if that couldn't be done, to answer families' questions. So it's not a case that they're not important, but realistically it's a small number of reports that have been issued this year, and I need to be honest and deal with your expectations and with families. We do not anticipate, with the current workload and resourcing levels, being able to make much progress on many of those cases.
I was listening to the Chief Constable in terms of all of this. I just wanted to be clear. I think you may have answered this in terms of resource and in terms, of course, of priority. You are still involved. There were a number of cases you're involved in. That does not affect those. In other words, I understand there's an investigation into the activities around the MRF organization in 1971-72. You mentioned the issue around the person known as steak knife, and also there's been some arrests on the Sunday issue. So those cases are continuing on at the same rate, or is it having any effect on them?
No, there's absolutely no reduction in our efforts or our capacity being directed towards those cases. As things stand at the moment, those cases and 1 or 2 others are the cases that are being worked on. And the point that I was making, and we will not pull away from that, in fact we will surge resources towards them at times of increased operational activity. So the MRF case, for example, has been well publicised. Efforts have been made in the last few days, and some progress has been made around all of that. So this isn't about pulling back all it's simply doing is saying, in the absence of a wider political societal agreement on the past, there's only so much we can do, and I don't want to raise families' expectations to then turn around and disappoint them and not meet those. But on those high-profile cases that you've mentioned, work will continue. The most recent case, which is the referral from the director to me on the person known as Steak Knife and the associated crimes, and the other suspects that will undoubtedly fall into that. We haven't started an investigation on that, let me be clear. We're looking at potentially 50 or more murders over a period of 17 years and the linkages between them. And all that we're doing at the moment is scoping the scale of the investigations that will interlink and so on. And we're also having discussions with the Department of Justice and with the Secretary of State around how those will be handled, both in terms of public confidence and Article 2 independence and perceptions of independence, and also in relation to the resource and the finance that would be required to take on this extra category of work that hadn't been previously planned or budgeted for.
Just to finish on this, so that I got it right when you were answering that, Bryce, in terms of the 900 odd cases which are outstanding, there is no intent to prioritise in terms of, because what you're saying is you have difficulty in resourcing it, and I understand it's to do with there not being a political agreement in that. Have you an intention of investigating any of those in the short term or not?
Well, it's not that there's no intent. We have got a very structured and we think logical and defensible case sequencing model that looks at each case and puts it into an order, some of which is just chronology, that, you know, we'll deal with the first ones first, but actually where there are other factors that come into play that could push those up the prioritisation list, then we'll come to them. But what I'm saying is, of the 937 cases, they're just sitting there with no referral from the DPP, no referral from the Ombudsman, no investigative journalism around them, no other criminal justice opportunity that's obvious through, say, a DNA or a fingerprint hit or something. Of those 937, we see the workload on the current big cases that we're dealing with as there's little prospect with the current resourcing levels of getting to start doing straightforward review work on those on a routine basis. But it's not not wanting to or an intention not to review them. It's just being honest and pragmatic about what we can do with the current resource levels.
Can I just sort of summarise and say that the absence of financial resources by the executive and or the British government has really resulted in a de facto amnesty to those who perpetrated those murders?
Well, that's so the language that I would use. I don't see any amnesty in all of this. I think I made the point that resourcing and capacity is one issue, but it's not the only issue. There is an issue around creating a mechanism for dealing with the past that enjoys the confidence of families and victims and survivors right across the political spectrum. That hasn't been forthcoming, but you know, our responsibility under law to investigate crime and bring offenders to justice in a way that secures public confidence hasn't changed, and we're not going to walk away from our responsibilities in that. But we also need to be honest and realistic around timescales and capacity and the public confidence issues.
Thank you very much. Move to Ryan.
Katrina, was supplementary
there? Thanks, Chair. Could I just start my comments, Chief Constable, by wishing Chief Superintendent Nigel Grimshaw the very best in his new role in Belfast City Council. I think Nigel's done an excellent job in Belfast over the last number of years and has been a model officer. He's in the audience there, so I just want to wish him the best in his new role. Secondly, I would like to maybe get an update from ACC Todd on plans around the Drink Drive campaign at Christmas time.
Thank you, Ryan. Those of you unfortunate enough to see the media last week will know that I was on the television doing a launch around our activity for this year. There's been significant effort behind the scenes, and that led to the launch last Thursday of the Winter Drink Drive campaign, or anti-drink driving campaign, and activity has already started on that. As I've said on the media, sort of two fairly broad benchmarks for success on that. We like to be reporting back in January that we've increase the amount of police activity in relation to that, and increase the number of roadside breath tests, but actually what we'd like to see is the number of arrests and people going to touch the streets falling, because that would be a fairly strong indicator that people are heeding the message and not drinking and then getting behind the wheel of the car, either immediately after socialising or indeed first thing the next morning. But in support of that, we've been heavily involved in the Road Safety Week with fire and rescue and ambulance service through the Radar Centre in the run-up to the launch of the campaign. And despite the fairly swingeing cuts in various budgets for road safety education awareness, I have been able to find funds and ways of protecting both the road safe initiatives for schools and the bike safe initiatives for motorbikes. And we filled a lot of the gap in traditional media with the social media campaign, which many board members will have seen. So there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes, and I'd like to give members a lot of reassurance around that. However, you're struggling on an almost daily basis with the scale of the challenge. We lost our 66th person on the roads in Northern Ireland this morning, and it's, you know, I always say these things, there are numbers and statistics in their families and friends, and the person lost this morning was part of the police family, part of the police friends, and a recently retired officer killed on his motorcycle this morning, so it brings you closer to home, the reality of it. And as recently as Sunday morning, travelling to Garnable, I had occasion to call in roads policing. It was torrential rain, where I was having to reduce my speed on the motorway because two-speed wipers weren't enough to clear the rain, and the road was awash, and a driver went past me, I would estimate, doing 80 or 90 miles an hour. When the vehicle was stopped, it turned out to be an 18-year-old driver still in the right place. That's the scale of the challenge. We shouldn't underestimate it. But be rest assured, we continue to do the work behind the scenes, and despite the various challenges around budget and availability of resources, we are finding new, creative and innovative ways to fill the gap.
Thank you. Trina,
and on the day that's in it, I just want to put on record my deep concern about the British government's military intervention in Syria. I think it's a serious mistake. It'll have an impact on civilians, obviously in Syria, but it'll also have an impact on communities here throughout Europe. And that's what my question is about. We have an increasingly diverse society here in the north, and we've seen recently Islamophobia unfortunately coming to the fore. We saw the attack in Ballykeal against the Ibrahim family, and we see racist marches being filed for. And my question is, I know that you did some meetings with people from the Muslim community. What steps is the PSNI taking to be proactive? One, to ensure that perpetrators of hate crime are brought to justice. Two, what measures, proactive measures are being taken to ensure that our Muslim communities are feeling safe. And three, we have Syrian refugees coming to the north of Ireland in the very near future, and obviously we want them a big fáilte romhaibh to them, and I wonder what measures also we all can collectively take to ensure that they feel safe in our country.
Well, clearly the whole piece around hate crime is something that we take very seriously. We've had a great deal of internal audit and inspection work done because we realised that it was such an important issue for victims and actually therefore for public confidence in policing. Stephen Martin has led on that, and he will talk to it. And we engage in a routine basis with leaders within the Muslim community and indeed across as many minority groups that will engage with us. We realise that there is a piece of work to do in securing confidence in there, and the challenge being brought to us by displaced families being welcomed into this jurisdiction is a positive thing, but we also recognise that there will be some small-minded people who will be threatened by that and may well respond in a prejudicial way, and if that crosses the line into criminal activity, we will not be behind the door taking robust action against them through the criminal justice process. But Stephen leads in this for us, and they will have some commentary to add to these issues.
Okay, thank you. Well, hate crime is taken very seriously by ourselves and indeed by the board, because the number of questions you ask about this is one of the subjects that you routinely come back to. It's one of the ones that you're carrying out your own thematic work around. So It's a common concern that we have with you. We have a range of policies and procedures that set out clearly that this is a type of crime we want to see closer supervision, we want to see closer management intervention in relation to all investigations. I've briefed you quite extensively in the past, and I'll summarise some of that now, but just over a year ago I was appointed as Goal Commander within Northern Ireland for hate crime. And my colleague actually, Mark here on my left, he has a national role with hate crime, so I also get the up-to-date position from Great Britain. I appointed a Silver Commander, Paula Hillman, Superintendent in Belfast, and a range of other Bronze Commanders. This creates a structure, and we shouldn't get too caught up in gold, silver, bronze, but it creates a structure and a command and control, and it gives responsibility. So I feel responsible now for all things hate crime within the PSNI. We carried out a range of work over the last year around our investigative standards, around our intelligence, around hate crime, engagement, training, policy and communications, and there is a lead for each of those who coordinates activity on my behalf across the PSNI. We've looked at our IT systems to get better performance and management information for each of our districts, and each of the district command units have been asked to appoint and have appointed a hate crime champion in and around the chief inspector rank, who we bring together and meet with, and on a day-to-day basis they also take a role. Hate crime can have a devastating impact. It can be exceptionally traumatic, and we will do everything we can to bring people who commit hate crime before the courts. You raised a particular type of hate crime that's based on faith or religion. The latest hate crime statistical bulletin was published just a few days ago on the 26th of November and covered the period up to the 30th of September. So specifically in relation to faith or religious hate crime, that shows us that there were 40 faith or religious motivated hate incidents reported in the period October 14 to September 15. That compared with 46 for the same period the previous year. And in relation to crimes of that nature, there were 21 compared to 23, so a reduction of 2. And I'm pleased that our crime outcome rates, while still not good enough, have increased from 8.7% to 14.3%, but much more work to do. In relation to the third point of your question, you know, we recognise, as I'm sure you all will, that the recent horrific events in Paris may lead some people to try and justify attacks in Northern Ireland on those that they perceive to be Muslim. As a consequence of the Paris attacks, and indeed the attack in Ballymena, we have set up a specific, for a time period, a specific operation under the command of Chief Superintendent Henry Irvine to look at monitoring those attacks, looking at our response to those attacks, preventative work that we can do in relation to that, and also to manage from a policing point of view the impending arrival of the Syrian refugees. On the 17th of November, specifically myself put out directions to each of the districts, and that was the day that I appointed Henry Irvine as Goal Commander. So I asked him to be ensured that we were well aware of all the locations of Islamic centres, places of worship or businesses identified to the Islamic community. Briefing this and ensure this information was briefed out to our local policing team and neighbourhood policing team officers, highlighting those locations and police systems so that if an incident occurred, we knew, we would recognise immediately the potentiality of it and respond timely and appropriate. Officers paying attention, part of their daily patrols of those locations, and specific outreach to leaders within the Islamic community and offering of crime prevention advice. So that's ongoing. We have seen a number of attacks that have been well publicised in the last couple of weeks. We deplore them. We're working very hard at investigating them. And indeed, we have a man arrested following an attack on the Islamic Centre in Newtownards. We are linking very much in with OFM, DFM, strategic and operational groups around enabling the arrival of the Syrian refugees. So I'm well aware when the first group arrives. I know how many families are Christian, I know how many are Muslim, I know where they're going to be settled temporarily. Those addresses are passed to us for common suitability. We are well involved in that. I don't think it would be helpful for me to go into any of that detail in this public session. well aware of when the next number of groups are coming and where they're likely to be settled. So we are well plugged in there and working with OFM, DFM, and we will do everything we can as a police service to enable the effective settlement of those refugees within Northern Ireland.
Briefly, first of all, thanks for that very comprehensive answer, and I do welcome the work, the proactive work that has been done, and if there's anything we can do to help, we'd be happy to, well, I certainly would be happy to work with you. And you did quote statistics there, but even if you read, and I'm not doubting the statistics in any way, but I'm sure you'll agree with me, there's a serious lack of underreporting as well. And even I noticed, I reread the interview with the Ibrahim family, and they were saying it wasn't the first time that they had experienced Islamophobia. So I just urge you to continue with the work, and I think the more we all work together and show political leadership, the better it will be, because I think we're going to go through some tough times ahead, particularly with the indiscriminate bombing campaign in Syria at present.
Okay, thank you.
And the final question from Deirdre Blakely.
There's uncertainty around next year's budgets. We know we have to apply up to 10% on national word cuts across the board. But I suppose one, what percentage do you think we're going to have to apply? Can you update us on that? Sorry. And two, what discussions are happening behind the scenes to minimise the percentage we're going to have to apply to the board?
Well, we don't know. It would be guesswork. We have done some scenario planning. Our Assistant Deputy Chief Constable has led on that. He can give some of the thinking what we're doing against those scenarios, and also a broader, more strategic piece about really looking at how we can minimise costs within the organisation by doing things differently and maintaining the service levels at the same standard or even better standards on occasions. And of course the test of this will be pretty independent and critical, because HMIC are coming in to do an effectiveness and efficiency inspection, and obviously have been engaged with the board around the terms of reference for that and what it's going to look like. But we realise that the scrutiny is going to be coming. We realise that the budget is going to be cut. Drew can comment to what extent. And so we've got priority-based budgeting in place to make sure that we're as ready for that as we can be right across the organisation.
We've done scenario planning against 5 and 10%. There is, as yet, no indication as to what extent any cut might be or the efficiencies required from us. But with 5% would be very difficult for us, 10% almost impossible to deliver in-year savings and still maintain our frontline services. And so 10% cut would undoubtedly start to impact on our frontline delivery. So we're very concerned about that. We are going through all the processes you would expect us to undertake as a large-scale public sector organisation. We are looking at our structures, we're looking at our management on costs, we're looking at our processes, but we're looking at also everywhere, every corner of the organisation where we spend money in preparation then for just this age really of austerity, while at the same time maintaining as best as possible our complete service in terms of frontline delivery. The process that we're entering into, priority-based resourcing, will allow us to make very informed decisions about the level of service that we can provide, maybe how we can work with others to reduce at least some of our demand, and what resources we're going to put against what risk. So, in fact, to reverse that, what risk we're prepared to carry against the resources we can deploy against it. So. That's a process that will take us most of this year, next year, to October 16 to complete. But at the end of that, we'll have a very fine, detailed view of the organisation, where our resources are and how we're spending our money, and that will then help us in delivering on the cuts that are undoubtedly coming in austerity. But 5 and 10% are very difficult scenarios for us, and 10 at this distance looks almost impossible to implement.
Thank you all very much. That concludes our business for this meeting. I would like to add our thanks of the board to Nigel Grimshaw. He's getting even more embarrassed. But I'd also like to say on behalf of the board, thank you very much for the marvellous contribution that you've made to policing. I think you're going to be a great loss to all of us, but we certainly wish you very well in your new appointment. I'd also like to wish everybody, all the officers here and their families, all my colleagues on the board, and all of our staff and the public who are here, a very happy Christmas and hopefully a very peaceful one. And we'll just remember Alan Todd, if you're having a glass of wine,